Oh, it's lovely to see so many great colleagues here. Welcome. And I'm just delighted. And I know a few more will be joining, but let me just start my slides very briefly. I'd much rather look at your smiling faces, but let me just push these slides through. And I'm so grateful. How is that? Are you seeing a full screen?
It's good, Kasia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
it's
Thank
good.
you.
You can see.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for the feedback. Well, thank you so much. My name is Constance Neely. I'm with the Shared Decision Hub at C4 ICROF. The headquarters is in Nairobi. I obviously would love to just give a very brief overview. This program is within the Regreening Africa program, which is headed into its last year and on target to reach the goals it had set out, which are 500,000 households across 1 million hectares of restored land. And we've got many, many colleagues from these countries who have joined us. And this is the realm within which we're working, and we're delighted to have people who are not part of the program joining us. I just wanted to mention this is being facilitated by the Shared Decision Hub, and the whole focus there is on stakeholder engagement and fostering evidence-based, experience-based dialogue, planning, and decision-making. So this is one of a series of our cross-country virtual learning events, and today we're going to be focused on an amazing topic: faith-based and faith-inspired approaches to land restoration. And just quickly, we have one main objective, and that's really to explore how faith-based and faith-inspired organizations, groups, and individuals are approaching land restoration, and to discuss some examples of faith-inspired and interfaith efforts for accelerating, promoting our environment, and building resilient livelihoods. Now, before I go on, we'd like to interrupt the original flow because we've actually got a better flow. We are delighted to have Mr. Mukhtar Ogle, who is the Secretary of Strategic Initiatives of Cabinet Affairs in the Executive Office of the President of the Republic of Kenya. And I have had some interaction with Mukhtar, and he is a consummate diplomat, humanitarian, and peace builder. And because he has a flight to catch, he has kindly joined us to give us some opening, encouraging remarks and share some of his wisdom. Mukhtar, may I invite you to take the floor, please?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you. I'm sorry for disrupting the program as planned. This was an emergency flight I have to take to my rural area. Thank you, everyone. I think Regreening Africa, faith-based and faith-inspired to land restoration, to ask ourselves what the challenges are and what the issues are, resolving climate change crisis by looking at the ecological and the spiritual economics of climate change. This is a very timely theme for discussion, in my view. We all regard climate change as an impending problem, which requires immediate and drastic action to reduce household emissions. But it's important to ask ourselves, why faith? Why faith? Because we need to reach out and prompt the critical mass of our society who are inspired and propelled by the power of faith to make the right decisions for impactful interventions beyond the boardroom semantics that we are used to in terms of addressing the issues of climate change. Faith communities for me in Kenya, especially in the communities that I work with in peace building and community resilience, are the bastion of environmental stewardship against the pollution and destruction by human beings, either by farming, livestock, or of late extractive industry. And engaging them based on their inspiration, based on the scriptures that different communities, whether they are Muslim, especially in Kenya, or Christian, or other traditional faiths, is very important. Faith-inspired or faith-based climate change interventions have been inspired by the failed politics and ethics of climate change, in my view, especially by the ruthless multinationals in cohorts with some governments. Such groups, driven by economic interest, tend to pervert reason, espouse values of human rights, yet erode and humiliate life, erode human dignity. We must restore land so as to be at peace with Mother Nature, in my view, so as to stabilize the greenhouse concentration in the atmosphere. The fate of humanity is at risk. So community ownership, especially the faith community, is very crucial to allow our ecosystems to adapt naturally to the challenges of climate change. More importantly also, as we do land restoration, we also need to have a feed-secure communities, especially in food production, that is not threatened by our reckless disruption of the systems and by remaining at peace with Mother Nature. Also to establish sustainable economic development. Faith-based and faith-inspired interventions must reclaim land spaces for sustainable and responsible sustainable development. We all agree that we face fragile futures. We must therefore examine the uncertain economics of disaster and climate change through innovative and plausible faith-inspired, faith-based interventions. We always undertake, especially governments, we undertake risk management to contain statistically predictable future events. But what about what is unpredictable? The future shocks. Uncontrollable, some might regard it these are uncontrollable acts of God. And this is where the faith groups come in, where we deploy science and human ingenuity to overcome some of the challenges. As faith groups and communities require a strong and a more globally coordinated government response in dealing with the disasters and keeping economic inequalities low, especially those concerning climate change, as a necessary measure to achieve any semblance of future progress of humankind and for us to remain at peace with Mother Nature. Thank you very much and God bless you. And please allow me now to catch my flight.
Thank you so much, Mokhtar. Everyone is applauding you and safe travels. I know you're going to miss some of your good friends on this call, but we will be in touch, and your message of honesty and hope very, very well received. Thank you so much, and safe travels.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so let us, while we've got, before we go back to the screens, I would like to invite our program manager, Mika Bourne, to say a couple of welcoming remarks. Mika, we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Constance, and wonderful to see everybody online and the numbers growing. I just really wanted to outline how important I think this topic is and how delighted I am that we're here today to talk about it. Just over a year ago, I met with Imam Ashafa and Pastor James and was really inspired by the message that they had and the role that faith-based approaches could have in linking and promoting and scaling land restoration and the relationship between people and land. And so to hear today from some of those voices and some other perspectives, I think is really critical. And so thank you all so much. Thank you, Constance and Alan. And I look forward to hearing how the day's session goes. Thank you, Constance.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mika. We're so delighted that you're here and you know so many of our partners. All right, I am just going to quickly share that we are going to have a lovely event today. We are entering into the opening, the setting of the stage, and then we will have some amazing colleagues frame our conversation. We're excited this afternoon to have 3 case studies, one from Kenya, one from Madagascar, and one from Niger. And then we're going to have an experience sharing breakout group, followed by a plenary discussion, and we will leave the meeting with some messages of hope from each and every one of us. And I just wanted to quickly mention that we've got an amazing set of speakers today that are going to be framing our conversation. We will introduce them individually as they speak. And our good colleagues from Kenya, Madagascar, and Niger. And of course, I want to introduce the people who are causing this to happen, including my great co-facilitator, who I'll introduce in more detail in a moment, Dr. Alan Channer. We've got Ms. Laura Mukwana. We've got Mr. Nigel van der Wood, Pierre Andrea Perani, who you met at the very beginning. And then we have Emmanuel Serge and 2 other colleagues who are serving as our interpreters based in Ghana. So with that, I want to stop sharing my screen. I want to invite everyone to please be very open and honest and take the time to share your experience, be comfortable, get your tea, have your water. We're asking our speakers to stay on time. And most importantly, let's learn and teach and share together. So with that, I would like to invite my dear colleague, Dr. Alan Channer, and I want to give a little bit of background because he, again, is a peace builder. He's an environmentalist and he's a communication specialist. It's a beautiful package. He serves as a senior fellow for the Global Evergreening Alliance. He is the co-director of the Summer Academy of Land Security and Climate in Geneva. And he's also a senior advisor for a Kenya-based NGO called Oiko Diplomatique. So with that, Alan, may I invite you to facilitate more on our setting of the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Constance. You know, it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to co-facilitate with you. I think 7 years since we first met in Kenya, and to work with the Regreening Africa team on this theme, which I think is quite a pioneering thing to do for a research institute to engage with faith communities like this. And in that vein, a few months ago was held in Nairobi a quite pioneering workshop co-organized by C4ICRAF and Oiko Diplomatique. Oiko Diplomatique, just to say about it, is an interesting Kenyan NGO in that it's founded by the former General Secretary of the World Council of Churches, Reverend Dr. Sam Kobia. So he brings to it an immense wealth of experience about interfaith relations and the volition of faith groups to engage in environmental stewardship. It was a great pleasure to work on that workshop and to work closely with my colleague from C4ICRAF from the Regreening Africa program, Laura Mukwana. And she's going to give you a brief overview of the insights that developed from that workshop. But just to say a little bit about Laura, who's a passionate environmentalist, and she uses all her multiple talents to focus into that. And she currently serves as a consultant for stakeholder engagement for land restoration with the Regreening Africa program. So Laura, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Alan. And thank you all for joining. So I'll just quickly share my screen to share with you the insights. So maybe I'll start with just a brief introduction about the workshop and why we held it. So we had this workshop in April, early April, and it was organized by Oiko Diplomatique, Rebranding Africa, and it's all under an action group which was formed last year after the Kenya National Landscape Restoration Conference. So that's how it came about. And one of the main objectives, or rather the three main objectives of the workshop, were to build an understanding among the faith communities of approaches to environmental stewardship. We wanted to also forge a team of Kenyan faith, for Kenya's faith communities' involvement in restoration. And lastly, wanted to develop a strategy and action plan for the involvement moving forward. So we had a total of around 25 people joining from various faith communities, the Christians, the Muslim and Hindu communities. We had other actors such as the Interreligious Council of Kenya. We had faith development organizations such as World Vision. We had scientists, we had traditional elders and representatives from the Kenyan government. So just to summarize some of the key outcomes before I go to the way forward, some of the things that important points or important recommendations that are given by the participants of the workshop on how faith communities can be more involved in restoration include things like, using the compounds of churches, mosques, and temples to do tree planting, to put tree nurseries, and then trying to integrate environmental stewardship into the faith community's teachings. If it's a Bible study, if it's a prayer meeting, integrating as the leaders are conducting these meetings to put in that message of restoration. Then integrating it into the institutions such as schools, such as madrasas, such as hospitals. And this can be done through maybe creating green spaces. If it's a school, that can be integrated into the curricula. And then also approaching government institutions. There are various projects such as adopting forests, which has been done by the Anglican Church in Ngong Forest here. And then using their media, such as the TV and radio stations, to share information and stories about restoration. And then lastly, we spoke about developing, or rather it was recommended that a communication strategy or plan should be developed on how to reach these different faith communities, because they have different priorities, they have different needs. So we need to ensure that this plan or strategy fits within their needs and priorities. So, and then it was also recommended that we should leverage upon the holy texts and doctrines and the traditions, which already speak about environmental stewardship, because all of them, cross-cutting, call for environmental conservation. So, for example, in Hinduism, they have that saying that if you take care of the environment, it will take care of you. They traditionally use maybe the bananas and almond leaves instead of plastics. When it comes to Islam, the Muslims are required to, for example, plant a tree every time someone is buried in the cemetery. And then Islam also forbids the wasting resources and environmental destruction. And of course, in Christianity, we have the creation story, and of course, the story of how God directed or gave the responsibility of taking care of the environment or entire creation to man. So these were some of the way forward, or rather we're creating an action plan on the way forward. These are some of the key things that were agreed upon as the way forward. Now, of course, we had advocacy. We had 4 main things. So the first one is advocacy. And here, we agreed that we're going to develop a call to action for all faith communities. And when you talk about we mean like the participants or the faith communities who are represented there, who are now going to be integrated into the faith-based restoration action group. We have now the institutions who are leading them, that's Oiko Diplomatique and Rebranding Africa. And we have World Vision, we have the other development ARDA, who was also part of the meeting. And then also the participants who themselves, like, for example, if we talk about the Holy Scriptures, they're the ones to provide such kind of references. We spoke about, we agreed to do documentation of success stories, and then creating visibility on what's already being done and having webinars on faith-based restoration. The aim of this advocacy at the end of the day is to show that faith-based, taking a faith-inspired or faith-based approach to restoration is actually viable and it can be done, and to get more members of these faith communities engaged. And then, of course, capacity building, because it was noted that there's a lack of capacity among faith-based communities to engage in restoration. They may be already doing it, but they don't have the knowledge on technology such as FMNR and other approaches, maybe agroforestry, and they don't even know, if they do, they may not be aware of how to upscale such kind of technologies. So developing faith-backed messages and toolkits for landscape restoration, and then creating incentives. So it was also agreed that we should now work on partnership building with organizations such as, of course, C4ICRAF to start with, maybe government institutions such as KFS, KEFRI, all those ones who are involved in landscape restoration. And lastly, I think there were some pilot projects which some of the members present or participants present during the workshop agreed to do. And for example, we had the Minda Trusts saying that they're going to be implementing the use of ablution water in the mosques for tree growing and tree nursery establishment. And they said that they'll give us an update on that. Then there's a tree planting during the SDA Youth Prayer Week, which ADRA and the SDA Church agreed to do. And then, of course, the training on faith leaders in Empowered Worldview and FMNR, which is going to be done by World Vision at the end of this month in Elgeyo Marakwet. So that's it. Thank you so much. I hope that was brief enough, Alan.
Thank you so much, Laura. And, you know, that gives a glimpse of something that was very rich. And I must say the exchange that you get when you bring faith leaders, faith-based development actors, and other stakeholders together is very interesting. One of the insights was that, say, from the SDA, the Seventh-day Adventists and ADRA, they were asking themselves why the church ministers and the development agency aren't working more closely together themselves in doing this kind of work. So there were many insights that came out. And to share also that there are sensitivities. You know, we're aware of competition that's taken place in the world between religions. I'm sorry to say that, you know, from a European background, we have had what's called the wars of the religion for hundreds of years between Catholics and Protestants, burning each other and so forth. We're aware of tensions between religious traditions, let alone between scientists. And we're aware of many scientists who can say, why are you working with religions? What do they have to do? What is their worldview? So underneath these things, there are some challenges. And that's why we thought in this, it's very reassuring to hear from authoritative faith leaders and peace practitioners about this overall subject. And so we're really, it's an immense privilege, really, to be able to introduce now two friends and colleagues who I believe we can all look to inform us on the role of faith in environmental stewardship and to inspire us. So we have Pastor Dr. James Wuye and Imam Dr. Muhammad Ashafa from Nigeria. They are the co-executive directors of the Interfaith Mediation Center in Kaduna, which they co-created out of the ashes of communal conflict in the 1990s in Nigeria, which they themselves instigated and suffered from. When we refer to them as doctor, it's not just one doctorate, but three each from 3 different continents. And, you know, it would be nice to go through their different awards, but suffice it to say that they've been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, one can ask, well, so what does that work in conflict transformation, peace building, interreligious engagement exactly have to do with land restoration? And that's the question that I'm going to start by asking them both. So Imam Ashafa and Pastor James, why are you as religious leaders and interfaith practitioners encouraging regreening.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you everyone on this link. It's such a privilege to be on this and to respond to this question from Dr. Alan Chana about why we do this. We are doing this because first and foremost, it's a divine injunction to regreen and to restore. Not only restore, that is also what we call restoration, and also the ritual of restoration. It is very key that we all do that because it's divine, and lack of doing that will deal with us. One other thing is to say that why we are doing this is because we have seen over the years that most crises in Nigeria and Africa and elsewhere are related to resources. And what is this resources? This resource is the big resource that man has, is land. We are talking to you from a city of Jos Plateau, and we are with livestock farmers and crop farmers this very moment, trying to marshal out an agreement, a protocol for helping to restore the land. They are killing every other week, every other month, and people are dying as a result of issues that has to do with land. And for this reason, we have decided to come here and marshal out a protocol, and which we hope, as it has worked elsewhere in Southern Plateau State, it will work here again. Issues of land is terrible. Land degradation, overuse of the land, and not giving back to the land, to us, is a sin. You know, it's a sin not to nurture the land again. Imam?
Thank you very much. I think for all team, I wish to with the greeting of peace by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This has been a very important moment, a very important event for us to reflect over, just as Pastor have said, the position of religion as regard regreening our environment, regreening our world with which we live in. And if indeed regreening our world and environment is a key factor, in Islam, as we know, the tradition is very clear. And what is most important for us to know is that for any person, we as a Muslim, it has a lot of spiritual consequences on deforestation, spiritual consequences on destruction of nature and environment, spiritual consequences on misappropriation or misuse and abuse of natural resources, which includes the issue of green, planting trees, cutting down trees, etc., even at the time of peace or at the time of war. And identifying these core issues and realizing what is happening in our society we live in today, it becomes very, very serious and enormous for us to wake up and do something. We saw many maiming and killing in Kaduna State, in Plateau State, in different parts of northern Nigeria entirely, because the middle belt of Nigeria is access to resources, access to land, access to green environment. These have been the consequences. And in most of the conflict situation, we end up finding the remote cause or the sustaining factor of the conflict to be access to natural resources. And because of that, one of the key issues in our development framework of our engagement was encouraging people to plant trees. The first important thing is the value of planting trees. It has a spiritual reward beyond living on earth. For example, in Islam, one of the key important things you can leave behind that you still continue having the dividend is planting a tree. If you plant a tree after you cease to exist on earth, as long as that tree is providing access for shade or is providing fruit beneficial to mankind, you are going to have a spiritual reward. That has been a very clear factors. And that's why we will now move to say, if we are to reduce this conflict situation, we need to go back to what to call regreening khutbah. Greening khutbah, greening sermon. So that our imams will have a strong sermons, and our pastors and priests, sermons should not be focused on how to regreen our environment. First, regreening our homes, regreening our madrasa, Islamia centers, Islamic centers, markas, or our theological institutions. And then not only regreening our theological institutions and madrasa, we talk about regreening our places of worship. The mosques, the churches, and all sanctuaries have to be regreening. And we've been encouraging most of those who are building new mosques, new places of worship, to put a template for regreening within those templates. These are the new model of approach. And we're happy that some of those mosques who have responded, it really provide a protection for the health of the environment, for the health of the people, and etc., etc. And apart from that also, one of the important things we've done successfully and across age is the issue of what we call storytelling. In schools where we met with students in schools, we go about storytelling. And in the storytelling, we talk about how to regreen their environment, how to regreen their world. Because for Muslims, let me talk about the Muslims, your spiritual reward after even our celestial home in the Quran regreen, picture a celestial home that has all the greening environment, that have the trees, plant, flowers, and gardens, running water, clean running water, running streams, etc., etc., are part of what is in the scripture. But most of the imams are silent about this. So to say, if you have a greening celestial home with plant of trees, with flowers, with gardens flying in your paradise, then paradise should begin on earth. And that's why we have to protect what we have today. We have to make sure we have the people should see it from these lenses to see the regreening of our environment and our world. But then we move into developing IEC materials. Today we have a lot of IEC material we develop on regreening of our environment. Some of them we are working on them as a result of our intervention in Kenya, specifically where we visited Wangari Maathai's what you call forest reserve in Nairobi, in the heart of Nairobi. We saw it, and then from that moment we decided we are developing the material, and that book is specifically about regreening our environment from the lenses of the imam and the pastor. That document we're working on, we hope when we finish, some of our brothers here will be interested to reproduce those books in large quantities in other translation that will go across the world. This is just a little to say so that we can open up for Q&A. People can ask questions and we're able to talk more deeper in terms of how far we're able to go in practical terms, what we're able to develop in terms of issue of land restoration and regreening our environment and the protection of our natural environments so that we all save the planet from human misuse and abuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wow. It's very interesting how you've developed these green sermons, and both in mosques and in churches, and you're imparting those. Can you share, I mean, and with this assembled expertise here, as you've done that, what kind of challenges those who you're preaching to face in kind of practicalizing what you're saying, and whether there are partnerships or ways in which technical agencies, people like Regreening Africa programs can kind of engage more with faith communities in order to get the results that we're all hoping for and which you preach about. Do you have anything to share on that?
Okay, that is good. Recently, we have identified what we call peace trees. Now, the peace trees are a species of trees that are beneficial to the livestock farmer and to the crop farmer at the same time. They serve as fodder, and the other also serve as also manure when it drops on the ground and decomposes, and you have a natural manure that is not it's purely organic. And having said that, we, like Imam have said, pardon our use of English, we call it divine intimidation strategy, where you evoke divinity to get compliance. As I speak to you now, we are raising over 1 million trees of a specific tree. The seeds fall during this season. It is summer in Nigeria, beginning of summer, what we call rainy season. And we are raising those trees together with a collaboration with the Ministry of Forestry. While we were here in Jos, they even sent to invite us to come to meet with them as to how they can be of any assistance. Now, this planting is not just going to be for the sake of regreening also. It will have a venture coloration to it. When people see the benefits and the social capital, the social impact of planting trees, not only because they will save the world, but also it will bring some bread on their table, people will compete to do that. So we are saying that apart from the books that we are writing, we are doing divine intimidation strategy, and there are also trees that are beneficial. A little example was this. We went somewhere to preach the gospel, and at the end of the day, there was a covenant between the land and the people. And every young boy, every young child, if she is a female, was asked to plant a mango tree. And if you were a male, you were to plant an orange tree. And then a ritual of healing the land done by the traditional leaders. So it was a hybrid of traditional and religious method of getting people committed. So the challenges that people will usually have is access to those trees or the tree seedlings to raise. And that we are beginning to address by raising capacity, by getting resources to plant as many trees as possible, and ask the people, watch over this tree as an act of worship to your creator. And I can tell you, 3 years down the line, people were harvesting mangoes and they were harvesting oranges. Not that the land only is healed and is restored, people also are getting some dollars, some pennies, some naira into their pockets. So it has two-way benefits. So we are looking at this peace tree project, that if it can be escalated within the region, especially the sub-Saharan region, trees that grows in northern Nigeria, between the Middle Belt to the north of Nigeria, grow also in Niger, in Chad, in other areas where we have common desert. And we can actually help in stopping the desert by doing that. And see, the benefit that we have is that for every Friday, an imam has thousands of people listening to him or her. And on Sunday, the pastor has thousands. And Nigeria is very religious country. Africa is very religious country, and we worship our value. So we want to use the energy in our value to encourage the use of restoration, the ritual of killing and cleansing, and the benefit of the celestial being. Even as the Bible has said, time will come, a new heaven and a new Jerusalem will come down, green, the lion and the goat will graze together, the snake and the man will also move together. There will be harmony. So we have to start the harmony here on earth and beginning to live like that. Tell children not to throw trash, how to manage also our water system, and a lot of things. Because, Alan, you were in Nigeria some times ago. There are areas we drove with you. They were at forest, but now you go there, it has been chopped down completely. We want to restore greens on that hill again. I wish you will come back to see the damages we have done just within the space of 6-7 years. You will cry, and it pains me all the time.
Thank you, Pastor. Imam, we'll have a closing for this section, your closing thoughts, so that we'll then be able to move to the case studies. Thank you very much for this really, wonderful framing that you've given. So Imam, your concluding thoughts for our framing.
My concluding thought is that if we are to save the world, we don't need arms and ammunitions anymore. We don't need weapons of mass destruction. What we needed to save our world, to put the food on everybody's table, to secure the confidence of fellow human beings, is to move back into planting trees and saving our environment. Government should involve in greening our environment. Mass corporate organization that comes to collect large farms land and cut down trees, we need to revisit how do we assess, how do we give land, how do you approve land for these multinational corporations who cut down trees anyhow to plant trees and plant and for the benefit of just what they have or what they want to use it for. So therefore, I'm calling on the fellow mankind to support the initiatives of regreening our environment. And to regreen that is some of the models. When Musa, the man who stopped the desert, look at traditional approach in Benin Republic, and he worked with it, and he become a model for the world. Interfaith approach is a fast track, simple, less costly, more effective, because people were guided by their conscience to walk the work in transforming our environment, in healing the land. Because as long as there's no healing on our land, we cannot have a future. As long as there's no healing on the land, there is no future for us. I therefore want to leave with us the small story, 1 minute story, of this old man in his late 80s, towards 90s. And he went to the farm and he was planting trees. He was planting a date tree that will take minimum of 10 to 15 years for it to grow to maturity, for it to be eaten. And this young man come and saw the old man planting the tree, the date tree, and the young man was laughing at him. Oh, you old papa, why are you planting this date tree that you cannot even live to see in your 90s, to live to see, to eat it? How, why, what is the wisdom? And he says, reply, I'm planting these trees for those who are coming, because those I've eaten are planted by those who have come before me. So it's time for me to plant the tree for those who are coming. For the world to be saved, we have to give back to Mother Earth. To give back to Mother Earth is to plant trees or to protect trees, to clean the environment. And anybody can support. Not only if you don't have opportunity to plant, support the mechanism or institution who are ready to do that, so that today our world will be a safer place and we'll see no more war in our communities.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us and getting this moving like this. Thank you. Constance?
Thank you so much. You have inspired us so much, and with both your faith, wisdom, and the practicality of the work that you're doing. And we are grateful beyond measure for your being with us and helping us frame our story today. Thank you so much. At this moment, as you may all know, the Regreening Africa program has deep partnership with implementers from the NGO world. And we are so grateful today because we have representatives from both the Catholic Relief Services as well as World Vision International, who are going to also give us a sense of what guides their mission and how their work is manifested. So first, I'd love to introduce Ms. Lori Pearson. Lori is the Senior Policy Advisor for Food Security and Climate Change at the CRS, I believe, headquarters. And I did a little bit of research, and I was so fascinated to find out that Lori has worked both in Benin and in Cameroon. So she's lived there for a number of years. And Lori, may I please invite you to share?
Thank you, Constance, and thank you also for those very inspirational opening remarks that certainly resonate with us at Catholic Relief Services, and it's so exciting to be here and to be able to be part of this exchange. As Constance said, I'll share a little bit about CRS's mission-driven work and how it inspires our work in land restoration. And I should add that CRS is about 3 years in to a 10-year initiative to restore degraded land. And so this is an issue near and dear to our hearts. And I'm going to share, I have just a couple slides that I will share with you that I hope will work. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. CRS has a two-pronged mission that is very important to us in the way we approach our work and our faiths. The first is to promote integral human development overseas, in whatever shape that may take, be it health or childcare, emergency response, peace building. But we also have a second element of our mission that is to serve Catholics in the United States to live out their faith in solidarity. And that means for us helping to connect and build understanding and opportunities to serve vulnerable people overseas who live in very different circumstances than the Catholic constituency in the US. And that element of our mission is so important because we see the church really as a global actor that has a great variety of capacities and strengths and opportunity to connect people. And this is truly a mission, a global network for change. And when it comes to land restoration, the Catholic Church has placed a special emphasis on this issue. In 2015, Pope Francis issued his encyclical Laudato Si, which is a clarion call to action, in the Pope's own words, to every living person on this planet, to stop and reverse environmental degradation, to reset our relationships with nature, to fulfill our moral obligation as stewards of the natural world, and to address poverty and human dignity. And if you have not read Laudato Si, I really encourage you to look at this document. It is amazing in its insights and connections that it makes. I really can't cover the depth and the richness of it in this short time. But for us working on the land restoration platform at CRS, it's been a great source of inspiration because it so reflects what we're really seeing on the ground of the deeply interwoven connection between environmental degradation and poverty, and the need to address the two as a single complex problem. And as we move to think about these intractable problems like land degradation and climate change, CRS is relying on the church as a critical partner, and we're trying to think beyond the successes that we've had at the project level to build on those successes, but overcome the constraints of that project paradigm to consider sustainable solutions at scale. And that really brings us back to that idea of the church as a global network, a global actor with this great diversity of capacities and strengths to bring to bear on these issues. And so for CRS, and I think Laura Mukwana touched or referred to some of these roles that the church can play. For CRS, the church has been a critical implementing partner in building technical capacity of communities and delivering services for many, many reasons, but it includes the trust that the church is able to build with communities and the incredible presence the church has throughout the world, including in very remote areas where often there are no other services. And so beyond technical partner and capacity builder, the church, because of this trust and presence and reach, also has an amazing role of community awareness builder, with the ability to share needed information that some may not be able to access elsewhere. And in turn, this role of community awareness builder makes the church an effective community mobilizer. And because of the faith mission, the church can also inspire people to action, to change behaviors that may be degrading, that can be more sustainable. And when we think about policy advocacy at both national and international levels, the church has the possibility of inspiring systems change. And so this is really only cutting at the surface of the multiple roles that the church can play, but it's why it's important that we as faith actors engage with the church, unite with one another to work together to change these systems that have marginalized vulnerable people and led to exploitative relationships with nature, so that we can bring the full strength of our faith and our missions to change these systems. And that's why we're here today in that spirit of collaboration to harness the unique roles that we can play as faith actors. And we're just really excited for this opportunity and for the learning that's going to happen today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Lori, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for telling us more about the guiding framework of CRS and how it entails both practical implementation, awareness raising, and also policy advocacy. I think this is so important that these pieces come together, and we're very delighted that a little bit later in the program we'll be hearing about a project of CRS in Madagascar. So thank you so much, Lori. And at this moment, I'd like to introduce Mr. David Rogers. And David has a background in integrated water management. He is based in Australia, so up quite late tonight. And he is the grants manager for Regreening Africa for World Vision International. David, please, you have the floor.
Thanks, Constance, and thanks for the opportunity to share on this from our perspective. I think it's really an important workshop for us as World Vision, working across 8 of the countries, well, all 8 countries within Regreening Africa, and with our philosophy and approach to aid and development as a faith-based organisation. So World Vision sees international development as an expression of faith. The core values within World Vision, there's six main ones, and 2 of them are we are stewards and we are committed to the poor and vulnerable. So it's this expression of stewardship of the land and the people that is within so many of the faiths that we work across that is important to this work. We've also found that we're much more effective in our development work when we're speaking to people in a language that they understand and is their own language. So coming into communities and working through faith actors and within that language of someone's own religion, their own heart, is something that actually brings about a much more important impact. And I've found working across our interfaith teams, like one of my best moments in working in international development has been working through our team in Beirut, where we're having weekly devotions, bringing in leaders from the Shia, the Sunni and the Maronite community to talk about our work in restoration and how it impacts their religion and their expression of faith. So it's that camaraderie and finding common aspects of our faiths within this restoration calling that is so important to our work. So as we said in the introduction to this, faith groups are the largest part of civil society, and the influence that they have in the communities that we work with is huge. So when we come into communities, we tend to work through an area leaders and work with them to build up the relationships. So this puts us in a really good position to engage with that influence and that civil society work going on in these areas. So the predominant way we've done this is through the Channels of Hope program, which is making development so we've done one of our major language from different areas that we're working in and putting it into biblical messaging, Quranic messaging, messaging from Vedas, and putting that into our work in child protection, gender-based violence, so a lot of work around equality of people in the spiritual language for that, our work in combating Ebola and working on maternal, newborn and child health. So a lot of hygiene messaging from these spiritual texts, as well as combating HIV and AIDS stigma. And now we're starting to use this model a lot more in reforestation and just finding how rich this is a vein for the work that we do. So seeing the importance of environment across all faiths and these works of protecting environment, planting trees, stewardship of land and stewardship of resources being so important to the work. So all of these programs work through conducting catalyzing workshops with faith leaders and spouses, which equip them with the knowledge to use these messages and preach this to their communities. These leaders then take the knowledge back to their communities and work on community hope and action plans. As these faith communities implement these plans, we come in with opportunities to strengthen and try and find other ways to engage with infrastructure and other work that can help with that. A lot of this has involved cross-sharing between imams and pastors. We've got pastors to go and to swap and teach at mosques, imams to come and teach at churches. So a lot of this is the shared principles across the religions and the engagement that we can find through that. In conducting one of our workshops on FMNR and faith building, we conducted a workshop with 170 church leaders in Malawi, and we even had a bishop coming up and chastising the leaders in the group about their focus on heaven and their focus on the spiritual aspects of the world, when there's so much of the spiritual aspect within the land and the communities that we work with, which is something that resonates really heavily with me, as it's such a massive part of our Indigenous spiritual cultures here in Australia as well. So in doing this, we're working with groups like the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative to try and find more ways to bring this into FMNR, bring this into our reforestation and regreening practices. And I really look forward to Hamed's presentation to show more in depth what World Vision is doing specifically in faith in this project. Thanks.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for sharing both the World Vision perspective and approach, and also your personal perspectives within this. And I think it's really interesting that you're also resonating an earlier comment about how we have to not just have these messages inside of a church and a mosque, but actually deep into community and the roles that they can play. And so I also appreciated the interfaith dimension of what you've just shared. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it would be really important now if we listen to some of the case studies of how this work manifests on the ground and in the field. And I would like to invite Alan to please introduce our first case study. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Constance. Well, it's a pleasure again to introduce the Minda Trust from the coastal part of Kenya. And they participated and wowed the workshop.
Sorry, Alan, this is Pierre. I'm just checking that the interpretation is okay because I was hearing French interpretation on the English channel, but it seems all is good now. Sorry, please go ahead.
Great, thanks, Pierre. Thanks. Yeah, the Minda Trust wowed the workshop with their grassroots approach to environmental stewardship, community-based approach, and their interfaith way in which they were doing that. And they're going to share who they are, what they do as a bottom-up CBO in Kenya, and how they've naturally found an interfaith initiative as part of what they're doing. So we'll invite, I think there are 3, if not maybe 4. There's a team here from Minda Trust embodying the community-based approach. And over to you as to how I think, Pierre, you have their presentation, which we can bring up on the slides. And then each of you who are presenting, please start speaking and introduce yourself, and then speak to your presentation. Thanks so much.
Hi. My name is Mariam Wamboi. I work with Minda Trust. So I'll start by introducing what Minda Trust does, then my colleagues will continue. Okay. So
we have a bit of a return. I don't know if your colleagues are also there. Please, if you're in the same room, please make sure that the microphone of the other colleagues are muted, because we're getting a bit of a slight return, a slight echo. But let's try. Let's go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Mariam.
Okay. Oh, okay. So Minda Trust was formed as a lobby group. These are the members of Minda Trust. It was formed in 2008 as a lobby group. Then we grew from the lobby group. Can you hear me well? I can't hear you. You good? Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. So Minda Trust, we started as a lobby group because one of the reasons was that the land laws in Kenya were really depressing the members of the community. So we thought, because the land laws were not anchored within the Constitution of Kenya, so we lobbied for the laws to be anchored within the Constitution of Kenya, which is a plus for us, because as we're speaking in Kenya, the National Land Policy is now a law in Kenya. So who we are? We are a trust. We work with women, and our theory of change is the marginalized community. We empower the marginalized community to define, claim, and defend their rights, including using of land and natural resources. And then our right-based approach is that the community issues are basically rights. Oh, sorry. The community issues and basic rights, including access to land, related resources of the poor, is an outcome of social structures of the county, national, and international governments, which directly or indirectly deny them. So we empower the community and assist them to claim their basic rights, focusing on peace and security. Kindly, let's share the slides. Let's move on. So we empower the community. We assist them to claim their basic rights, focusing on peace and security development using the religious leaders, because as we've just said, that by the end of the day, it is the religious leaders' word that is gospel to everybody else. So we use the pulpit to talk to the community about land restoration. And let's continue, please. And then we do awareness through radio programs, because sometimes we get free to air programs. So we take that opportunity to talk to the community about issues of land, issues of natural resources, and issues of peace and security. On issues of, let's continue, on issues of environmental conservation, there are women that we train on how to use the natural resources as an income generating activities. It's an alternative. So we train the women on using the bark of the tree, of the neem tree. They make soap, and then they sell the soap. So that's an income generating activity for them. And then we use moringa seeds. Moringa seeds are known to cure some of the diseases. One of the diseases that are known to be cured by the moringa is there's stomach pain, there's the killing of the bacteria. Eventually, we introduced something, we introduced Mika initiative. Mika initiative is an interfaith initiative that we initiated as Minda Trust and Eleka Trust. My colleague is going to expound more on that, but the whole point of us creating Mika initiative was to bring back the intergenerational gap, because as we know, crime does not know religion. So we thought, if we create Mika initiative, it is going to bring harmony within the community. That is why we brought Mika initiative. My colleague will continue with that. So can you move on in the slides? So within the coconut tree, we make roofs known as makuti, and we make drones. Then we make coconut oil. The coconut oil is used to apply on the skin, and it can even be used to cook. We do kitchen gardening. Can you move on with the slides? We do kitchen gardening too, and we do beach cleanups too. So when we're doing the beach cleanups, we encourage the fishermen to plant more trees to conserve the environment. So asante, unless there are questions to be asked, I'll be here to answer them. Thank you. So I will introduce Jane Gilani, because she's a colleague who is going to talk more about Mika initiative. Thank you.
My name is Reverend Jane Gilani. I want to talk about why we formed the Mika initiative. 11 years ago, under the tutelage of the imam and the pastor from Nigeria, the two trusts, Minda, which means land in the local language, lands. One is Munda, and Minda are many lands. And Eleka, which in the local language means giving direction. We came together and we wanted to address this interfaith gap, because we come from a religiously pluralistic coastal Kenya, where Christians and Muslims have coexisted for many years without any conflict. But there was creeping in something that was coming in by violent extremism through radicalization of our youth. And it wasn't just forces from outside. We had our own youth turning on to their old men and women and calling them names in the name of wanting to forcefully inherit. And we saw there was a gap there, and so we formed this and we called ourselves Mothers in Kenya for Amani. Amani means peace. And so we've been having interfaith relations where intergenerational. We've done a video, Alan did a video where there is Reverend Jane Jilani, a religious mother, and Zuhura Juma, a youth, working together with the youth people. And so conserving our work and the nature that God has given us, we were inspired by faith. The Bible tells us, right, from my faith, that God has given us the gardens to tend. The Garden of Eden was given to tend. And again, learning and taking the cue from our tutors, our mentors, the imam and the pastor, we began to do this regreening, and Mariam has already alluded to it. Going forward, Shamsan is going to talk about how we want to use our places of worship in order to grow seedlings. But we want to begin again with the madrasas children and the Sunday school children in our places, so that again, the trees that are the seedlings from our places of worship can be taken to families, to smallhold homes. So it's a very much grassroots approach that is interfaith. So that is not only the mosque, it's also the churches in our coastal Kenya, where this initiative will take it to the families. So I will then introduce Halima, and then Halima will go on to introduce Shamsa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Jane Jilani, and thank you for the opportunity to be speaking here today. Like they said, my name is Halima Mohammed, and I'm glad that we are sharing the case studies back in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Mombasa. Other religions believe in the respect of the creation and the environment. Many Muslims believe human beings have the role of guardianship and the planet. Guardianship allows humans to make use of the environment for their survival, but this must never be taken to the level of exploitation. Land restoration is more than just planting trees for us. We have made this statement loud and clear because there are some papers and some scientific papers that are being written and disseminated that portray and show only planting trees, fencing them, and preventing communities and people to access it, in which the exact opposite. That is why we say the restoration is beyond only planting trees. It is more about agroforestry, agroecology systems. Sometimes there are agroforestry which are food production and trees, and sometimes they are purely for food production. It is because understanding the landscape, the mosaic of the landscape, and maintaining the integrity of the landscape as a whole. The reason you hear us mentioning that all the time is to remind ourselves that landscape occurs in mosaic, but you won't get anywhere unless you have a passion for trees. It's all about the passion and what we do. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has given us a rare opportunity to rethink the future we want to create. Healthier citizens, more secure livelihood, and greater equality for all. We can seize the opportunity now if we put land-centered solutions at the center of greener recovery. How? By creating job opportunities for our young people. This is easy. There's an opportunity, especially on the restoration movement. One can establish a tree nursery, one can plant tree and fruit trees and sell the fruits. There's also a lot of opportunity when it comes to restoration. It matters of empowering them with knowledge and making it easy for them to access the finance. We started a campaign in Minda Trust where we're saying running tree campaign, going through madrasas and schools, trying to educate our kids about gardening their own vegetables and how to plant, take care of trees. When you see the excitement in them when they're planting trees, And each and every day they go to the garden and see how is it growing? Have they watered the plants? And that energy is what we love about. And also another campaign that we're doing is My Land, My Right, where we are running around with women so that they'll be able to appreciate their land. They'll be able to plant as many trees as they can on their lands. At the same time, try to bring in the government so that the seedlings that are there, which are given for free, and some of them which you have to purchase, so it helps our women and our young people. Young people want to be involved in entrepreneurship ventures. Many of them are environmentalists, but we have not created spaces for them. We only often think they are either too young or not ready. I want to give an opportunity to my brother, Nagib Shamsan, who will be able to take forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And we have one more speaker. So enjoyed these three speakers on behalf of Minda Trust and Miki Initiative. May I invite our last speaker to take the floor?
Yeah, Shamsan, you're muted. You're still muted.
There I am now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. At the moment in Kenya, we are having an election time. The people of election is now on board. So as Minda Trust, what we are trying to come across with, we are trying to do people's manifestos. We are trying to form a land charter whereby the greening becomes an agenda during the campaign period. We are able now to meet several governors. We are trying to engage them to sign those charters. So what they'll be doing is in the county budget, when they become our governors in particular regions, they will be able to set aside some budget for seedlings. The biggest problem we've been having is seedlings, whereby the way to do it, the way to capture it, and the way to distribute it. Nobody wants to buy seedling, but they are able to take seedling at a free of charge. So with me, what you're trying to do is we're bringing seedlings in terms of fruits, whereby one could be able to see the results in a very short period. So ours was basically the land restoration and the regreening. We are trying to capture it exactly in the manifestos through the governors' pledges to us. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because it's part of their mandate as a county government to come up and put up a bond tree or a nursery tree that could help all the county towns to be restored in terms of trees. Moreover, when we had the National Lands Policy and the Constitution of Kenya, we made sure through Minda Trust and other consultation that now the land issue in Kenya is captured and within the Constitution. So now Chapter 5 talks about the rights of people using the land issue. So ours is basically awareness programs, demanding for the rights, and lastly is to make sure everything is captured within the government budgets. Without budget, this program will be nowhere. So we're so much in picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm having a little difficulty with hearing. Have you finished your comments, Commissioner?
Yes, I've finished, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. This was an extraordinary set of presentations around the work that's taking place on the coast of Kenya. And we're delighted also to see the relationship of this work with what we've heard about from Imam Ashafa and from Pastor James. So this is exquisite. I did want to check, are there any specific questions? We can take one. For our colleagues from the coast. Would someone like to take the floor? A comment or a question? I'm trying to see you all.
Yeah, I have a question. I hope you can get me.
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you, Ojambo.
Yeah, I'm Udao Diambo. I'm the board member of Kenya Renewable Energy Technology Association. We are really concerned with tree planting and environment protection through renewable energy. We're talking about solar, biogas, and I'm really moved by the presentation from the coast. I visit Mombasa, Malindi many times, and I'm happy that Minda Trust is doing a lot about environment protection through renewable energy. Now, I kindly request that the presentations, wonderful presentations from Minda and others be shared to all participants, because that's how we can take this only takeaway, which we can help us to go and implement all what have been put across by all presenters. And thank you for the wonderful job, all of you. And Lady Sherad, thank you very much from ICRAF. We do work closely with ICRAF, and we are going to work together. These presentations will help us implement all what we've discussed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ojambo, for that positive feedback. And I know our speakers very much appreciate that. I am going to just check in with my colleague, Jules Bayala. Are you still on the call? I wondered if you might comment, as our good colleague mentioned, the science that are we promoting agroforestry in science? Jules, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still there. It's raining currently in Ouagadougou, and I hope my voice will be clear enough. I really enjoyed this session. When I saw the title, I said, "Oh, what these people are going to say." But listening to the different interventions, sometimes you are just next to things and you don't think of them. And I never thought of how I can articulate this into my daily work. And it is everywhere. The Bible is saying it. Even the traditional religions in my own country, there is this, what they call sacred grove systems, which are protected area where the traditionalist goes and do the different sacrifices. And that was a way also to protect the environment and make sure that there is something which is preserved somewhere. And in those places, you are not allowed to cut a tree. And so we can find references on all the religions. And in a country like Burkina, and I think it's also elsewhere, there is what is now called ecumenism, where actors are trying to bring together actors from different religions to deal with development issues. But to be honest, I've never seen it going into restoration. That's the first time I'm hearing people, engaging, bringing different actors together and trying to do something about restoration. So it is really an aspiring session, particularly those days where we have conflict, the different crises we are having in the Sahel, which basis is, we all know it is to a large extent religious, So I'm just seeing a venue for us, or one of the venue for us, for our future work in the Sahel, in terms of, restoring land, both for the production, but also the different ecosystem services, and bringing science within that context. I guess it's going to be challenging, but I think it's also going to be rewarding. And I'm very excited to the future work in trying to take into consideration this type of setup or bringing these type of actors together to deal with restoration issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jules. Jo is a senior scientist with a long career of promoting agroforestry through science. And thank you for taking the time. I think that's a beautiful reaction. I would now very much like to introduce our next speaker for the next case. And we're welcoming Mr. James Hazen. He is the chief of party for the Spices project with the CRS. And he's based in Madagascar, and I believe he will be speaking in French. So I just want to alert, and we're delighted to have you. James, thank you.
Ok, merci Constance et bonjour tout le monde. Je pense que vous m'entendez bien? Oui, ça va? Et vous voyez bien l'écran? Ok, super. Oui, merci vraiment à tous. Et c'est vrai, c'est en fait toutes ces histoires et ces personnes qui ont parlé, ça nous inspire tous. Et c'est un plaisir pour moi de présenter un cas, notre cas à Madagascar avec CRS. En fait, j'ai mis les diapos en anglais et je vais parler un peu en français. Donc, comme ça, tout le monde peut comprendre un peu ce que je présente. Je vais parler d'un cas à Madagascar à travers le programme Spices. C'est un projet qu'on a lancé il y a quelques années. Et c'est vraiment lié à ce que Laurie Pearson avait parlé tout à l'heure. C'était en fait sur la restauration des terres dans les différents pays. Et ici, on va parler un peu de Madagascar. Je suis juste... voilà. En fait, le Madagascar, je pense que les gens en fait savent que c'est une grande île qui se trouve dans le sud-est de le continent africain. C'est la 4e plus grande île du monde en fait. C'est assez grand. Et on sait aussi que souvent on parle de la biodiversité et c'est vrai que ça existe. En fait, une richesse en termes de biodiversité à Madagascar. Mais ce qu'il y a aussi, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup de ces forêts, de ces choses qui existent, qui sont en train d'être perdues. Et c'est un peu dommage, et surtout pour les ressources naturelles à Madagascar qui sont très importantes. Je pense qu'on dit que presque 70% des forêts sont déjà disparues, et ça fait qu'on a vraiment des choses à faire pour si on veut conserver ce qui reste. Mais en même moment, on a beaucoup d'opportunités à Madagascar, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a des marchés qui cherchent plusieurs épices, des différents fruits, et en fait, ça nous donne une opportunité surtout d'augmenter la production à travers des systèmes de production qui sont plus durables. Et comme l'Église à Madagascar, l'Église catholique est vraiment dédiée à Laudato Si. En fait, c'est aussi une opportunité pour nous de voir comment, en travaillant avec l'Église, qu'on peut vraiment augmenter ces techniques à travers l'île. Donc, pour le projet Spices, en fait, il y a 4 grands éléments. Oui, c'est la restauration des terres, mais c'est aussi une liaison au marché. Donc, on fait la restauration, mais c'est aussi pour promouvoir certains produits qui peuvent être achetés par certains marchés, surtout le secteur privé au niveau national et au niveau international. On travaille aussi donc sur les chaînes de valeur. C'était vraiment de renforcer les capacités des petits producteurs. On les aide à se mettre en groupe, par exemple les coopératives qui ensemble, en fait, ont un peu plus de production et comme ça, on est plus intéressant au marché. On travaille aussi avec des jeunes. On implique vraiment des jeunes dans toutes nos activités en sachant que c'est vraiment la prochaine génération. C'est très important de les impliquer. Et aussi que le moment qu'on augmente ses revenus, comment on peut utiliser ces revenus pour améliorer la situation d'éducation et de santé des différents ménages. Et on fait ça à travers un système d'agroforesterie. On vient de parler quelle est la science derrière l'agroforesterie, et je pense que l'agroforesterie a une grande définition. Mais pour nous, en fait, c'est vraiment un système qui fait la promotion des différents arbres, des différentes plantes à différents niveaux. Et ici, c'est juste un exemple, mais sur la côte est de Madagascar, on a vraiment la possibilité de faire plusieurs niveaux. C'est-à-dire, on a des différents arbres qui ont besoin de l'ombre, et on a qui fournissent des ombres. Et en fait, ça fait qu'on a vraiment un système assez complexe qui peut nous donner des différents produits. Et aussi, ce qui est intéressant, c'est que les arbres qui sont les plus grandes, qui donnent vraiment l'ombre, ça aussi, c'est un habitat pour la biodiversité, comme les lémuriens, les oiseaux, qui sont très importants aussi pour la pollination des différentes plantes. Donc ça, c'est un peu le système qu'on a en Madagascar. Et en fait, normalement, on travaille avec des petits producteurs, mais il y a presque 2 ans, qu'il y avait un prêtre aussi qui est venu vers moi en disant que, hey Jim, tu sais qu'on a aussi des terrains du diocèse qui sont assez énormes, mais qui restent un peu dormants. En fait, on fait pas grand-chose sur ces terrains. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour vraiment restaurer ces terres et de rendre ça plus profitable pour la communauté et aussi pour l'Église? Et quand on a commencé à regarder un peu la situation, on a même déjà entendu qu'en Madagascar, on dit que l'Église catholique est le 2e plus grand propriétaire des terrains après le gouvernement, qui veut dire qu'il y a des terrains en fait qui sont immenses. Sur ces terrains, on a aussi des infrastructures qui peuvent être réhabilitées ou bien qui sont déjà bien placées, et que ça suit un peu la vision de l'Église à Madagascar sur la vision de diocèse verte ou bien la paroisse verte, qui fait qu'on veut rendre tous ces endroits où travaille l'Église, de rendre ça vert à travers la production, surtout de l'agroforesterie dans certaines zones, ou bien de différents systèmes dans les différentes zones, parce que Madagascar est assez divers. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Donc, comme on a commencé avec le premier site, c'était une paroisse qui avait 26 hectares de terrain, et on s'est dit, bon, peut-être c'est bien qu'on s'assoie ensemble avec eux, avec leur communauté, pour voir qu'est-ce qu'il existe. Et on a fait une cartographie participatoire pour voir un peu quelle est la situation actuelle du terrain. Et vous pouvez voir juste une petite image là qui montre un peu l'exemple, mais comment on peut organiser ce terrain pour qu'on puisse vraiment mettre en place une restauration qui peut donner une production aussi des aliments, mais aussi une production comme les systèmes d'agroforesterie qui peuvent donner aussi des produits qu'on peut aussi vendre à certaines sociétés privées ou même au marché local. Et on a dû aussi un peu revoir les rôles et responsabilités de chacun sur ces terrains pour voir qui sera responsable de vraiment rassurer que ces activités se font sur place, et aussi de voir le moment, par exemple, qu'on va vendre ces choses, etc., qui va gérer le côté finance aussi sur ces terrains. Et en fait, on a commencé, ça c'est un exemple, où on a vraiment, en fait, ce qu'on a décidé avec eux, c'est qu'un des objectifs, c'est aussi de promouvoir la formation des jeunes et aussi la restauration. Donc, on a pu réhabiliter un petit bâtiment qui sert comme un centre de formation pour les jeunes. Et sur les terrains qui sont là, on a formé ces jeunes et d'autres membres de la communauté sur les différents systèmes de production sur l'agroforesterie. Vous pouvez voir que là à gauche, on a en haut, c'est la vanille. Donc, même comme la vanille, par exemple, a besoin d'une tuteur, une arbre tuteur, en fait, ça fait qu'on plante aussi des plus grands arbres et qu'il y a des produits comme la vanille ou même le poivre noir, par exemple, et qui a besoin d'arbres qui jouent un peu comme tuteur. Et donc, ça fait qu'on peut mettre plusieurs produits sur un endroit. Et on met des pépinières.
Apologies,
aussi,
James.
Oui?
Okay, just checking the interpretation. Yeah, we're good. Please go ahead.
Ok, merci. Et donc, dans cette paroisse, c'est ça le système, et on a déjà une centaine de jeunes qui viennent pour faire ces formations, et ces 26 hectares qui sont là, on sont déjà tous, en fait, il y a des productions du riz avec des méthodes qui sont plus pérennes. On a des parcelles qui sont utilisées pour l'agroforesterie, et comme ça, on est en train vraiment d'apprendre aux jeunes et de restaurer la terre. Et ça a inspiré d'autres diocèses et d'autres prêtres et d'autres évêques de faire un peu la même chose. Et on a un autre modèle qui s'est installé aussi dans une autre zone, où on a décidé que cette fois-ci, on va utiliser ce terrain. On a fait un peu la même chose avec la cartographie, et on a lancé aussi la production. Et sur cet endroit-là, on travaille aussi avec des petits producteurs qui sont à côté, surtout ceux qui n'ont pas de terrain, etc. Et eux, ils travaillent sur ces terrains, et on a produit du riz, on a fait le cacao aussi avec des systèmes d'agroforesterie. Et en fait, on peut prendre ces produits pour les vendre, et l'argent qui revient, une partie vient aux membres qui ont participé à la production, et une autre partie revient pour faire des services de charité qui sont faits par l'Église dans ces zones pour les plus vulnérables. Et depuis qu'on a commencé avec ces 26 hectares dans une diocèse, on a lancé ces activités dans 12 diocèses avec plus que 4000 hectares qui ont été déjà identifiés. Et ça nous a permis de mettre en place des centres de formation et aussi d'avoir pas mal de production qui est vendue aussi aux différents partenaires du secteur privé. Et aussi, ça donne de la nourriture qu'on peut donner aussi aux plus vulnérables qui sont dans la zone et aussi de le vendre au niveau du marché local. Et là, c'est juste une petite carte pour voir que ça a commencé dans une des sites, hein, mais vous pouvez voir que sur l'île, en fait, ça a pu pris un peu l'échelle et on a eu pas mal d'endroits où on a déjà commencé. Et quand j'ai parlé un peu des 4000 hectares, ce sont des hectares qui sont identifiés où on va commencer, mais là, qu'on voit sur la carte là, c'est là où on a déjà commencé ces activités, donc plus de 2000 hectares pour faire la restauration. Et on pense que ça inspire pas seulement d'autres diocèses, mais aussi d'autres producteurs dans la zone. Et on espère même d'autres religions et les leaders religieux qui ont peut-être d'autres terrains, etc., qui peuvent être utilisés pour ça. Comme j'ai dit, nous-mêmes, nous avons des liaisons avec différents partenaires du secteur privé. Et ça fait qu'on fait la liaison entre ces secteurs privés, pas seulement avec des petits producteurs des coopératives, mais même avec les différents diocèses et les paroisses, parce que ces produits, en fait, peuvent être aussi vendus au niveau du secteur privé. Donc, c'est vraiment de lier nos partenaires avec le secteur privé pour promouvoir en fait ces activités vers le marché. Donc c'est vraiment pour nous, c'est comment on peut continuer à mettre ça à l'échelle à travers cet engagement de l'Église. C'est vraiment aligné avec des priorités du gouvernement qui est vraiment sur la restauration de la terre et aussi d'engager des secteurs privés dans tout ce qu'on fait pour assurer que ça peut être pérenne et durable pour la long terme. Pour nous, on travaille déjà avec plus de 30 000 petits producteurs. On a déjà presque 500 000 arbres qui ont été plantés, avec presque 1 million qui sont dans les pépinières. On a eu les ventes vers 760 000 $. Ça, c'était l'année passée. Bon, en fait, on a encore des comptes. Je pense que ça va dépasser même 1 million. Et comme j'ai dit, on a pu même faire pas mal sur les différents terrains de l'Église, avec l'Église. Et on va continuer à faire notre mieux pour mettre encore ça plus à l'échelle. Donc, merci beaucoup. Je pense que c'est bon pour moi. Merci.
Thank you so much, James. Wow, that was an excellent presentation as well. And what I loved is when you talked about sort of coming to that agreement on the church lands and then showing that the 12 dioceses are there and 2,000 hectares. It's very, very impressive. We appreciate your sharing those numbers. And so thank you so much. And also showing how CRS has such a strength in partnering across not just civil society, but with the government and with private sector. It's very impressive. I've heard for a long time about the Madagascar story, so how nice to hear it firsthand. Thank you. I wanted to check, is there a quick question or a comment for our good colleague from Madagascar? Please, you're welcome to raise your question or your comment in English or in French. Do we have a comment? I'm looking. I'm showing patience. James, I think you've wowed us. So thank you so much. I think we may come back to you at a later moment. And as I mentioned, we are so fortunate in the Regreening Africa program because of the amazing skills and passion of our NGO partners. And another NGO partner, of course, is World Vision. And so I'm very delighted to introduce Mr. Hamed Constantin Shibozo, who is he is a team leader with World Vision, and he has coordinated the Regreening Africa project for World Vision in Niger. And Hamed, I'd like to give you the floor, and I understand you will speak also in French. Thank you.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup Constance. Donc je suis Ahmed Constantin Chibozo du côté de World Vision au Niger et je coordonne le projet Greening Africa comme l'a dit Constance. Et je suis honoré aujourd'hui de participer à cette rencontre assez importante où j'ai encore appris davantage sur les expériences d'autres pays où mes prédécesseurs ont partager ce qui se fait. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que World Vision est une ONG confessionnelle chrétienne et il est important de mentionner que au Niger, nous sommes un pays hautement islamisé. On est à 99% de la population qui sont musulmans et donc mettre à l'échelle une action quelconque de développement ne pourra vraiment, à mon sens, se faire sans implication de ces leaders religieux-là qui ont un prédécesseur l'a bien dit, ont un auditoire assez énorme et se font bien écouter. Donc, je vais vous présenter pour le cas de Greening Africa au Niger, comment est-ce que nous avons collaboré avec les acteurs de foi, tant du côté des musulmans, tant du côté de l'Église et comment est-ce que nous arrivons à sensibiliser et conscientiser les communautés pour restaurer nos écosystèmes. Donc, ce projet déjà est mis en œuvre dans la partie ouest du pays, comme vous le voyez sur la carte, dans 3 communes, Wallam, Simiri et Hamdallah, et nous sommes comme partenaire d'exécution World Vision en collaboration avec CARE et la GIZ qui pour le notifier a déjà fini sa partie dans la mise en œuvre qui a traité de l'économie de la dégradation des terres. Et nous avons comme support le CIFOR ICRAF. Donc, nous avons des partenaires stratégiques, il faut le mentionner, ce sont les ministères sectoriels, l'agriculture, l'élevage et surtout l'environnement. Et nous collaborons aussi avec les institutions de recherche qui sont présentes au Niger et beaucoup d'autres ONG, tant internationales que locales, qui aussi collaborent à nos côtés, toujours dans le même objectif. Et comme je l'ai dit, nous collaborons étroitement avec les mairies et aussi les leaders religieux et coutumiers. L'objectif de ce projet, c'est, je vais le résumer simplement selon ma vision, c'est comment est-ce que nous améliorons le quotidien de nos communautés dans le monde rural, surtout des personnes vulnérables. Et il faut le dire, pas avec des mots difficiles à comprendre, mais ce qui intéresse nos communautés, c'est comment se remplir le ventre et comment se remplir les poches pour subvenir aux besoins des ménages. Donc, cela, pour nous, c'est comment booster les productions agricoles, renforcer cette sécurité alimentaire-là à tous les niveaux. Et donc, pour cela, c'est restaurer nos écosystèmes et rendre beaucoup plus fertiles nos terres. Nous avons aussi comme objectif de renforcer la gouvernance au niveau local sur les ressources naturelles et aussi accroître la résilience de ces communautés-là. Donc, renforcer aussi les capacités de nos communautés tout en développant des stratégies pour développer des activités génératrices de revenus, notamment pour booster l'économie au niveau local et surtout renforcer les aspects nutritionnels. Donc, quelques actions phares qui ont été menées dans le cadre de ce projet où on a vu l'implication des leaders religieux, c'est notamment l'éveil des consciences, les sensibilisations qui sont massivement effectuées au niveau de notre zone d'intervention par ces leaders religieux, tant musulmans que chrétiens. Et donc, cela se fait à travers divers canaux. Premièrement, nous avons ce qu'on appelle des assemblées villageoises où on a l'imam du village ou dans notre village qui, suivant les écrits coraniques, explique aux communautés comment est-ce que nous sommes responsables de l'entretien de notre environnement. Et aussi à travers les radios communautaires où on a souvent des prêches qui sont diffusées où les thématiques sont spécifiées suivant ce qui est attendu. Donc, le projet a renforcé le programme de ces radios communautaires-là en inscrivant ce genre de thématiques pour toucher un plus large public. Une seconde action qui est menée, c'est comment mettre à l'échelle tout ce qui se passe comme option de reverdissement. Nous en avons diverses au Niger. On peut citer la régénération naturelle assistée, le FNA, et aussi beaucoup d'actions de plantation qui se font. Et on n'oubliera pas aussi de mentionner qu'au Niger, nous avons des terres hautement dégradées où on n'a aucune végétation. Et donc, c'est à ce niveau que nous faisons recours aux ouvrages CSDRS, c'est-à-dire le creusage des ouvrages pour capter les eaux de pluie à des fins de planter des arbres et aussi des espèces fourragères. Donc, d'autres actions en termes d'influence aussi, c'est ce genre de réunion où nous essayons de mettre ensemble les autorités locales, les chefs religieux et les chefs traditionnels pour discuter des différents défis de notre environnement et aussi liés au contexte. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que dans la région où nous intervenons, où nous mettons en œuvre ce projet, nous sommes frontaliers au Mali et c'est une zone d'insécurité qui est assez instable. Et cela crée beaucoup de vulnérabilité au niveau des communautés. Une autre action assez importante où les leaders religieux interviennent, c'est tous les aspects de formation et de renforcement de capacité. Comme vous le voyez sur les images, nous faisons recours à ces acteurs de foi qui renforcent les capacités des communautés sur diverses pratiques. C'est notamment sur la RNA, souvent sur la plantation des arbres, mais aussi sur les actions de greffage, qui est aussi une option qui est en train de se développer au Niger, le greffage en plein champ pour certaines espèces d'arbres pour booster la production des fruits sauvages. Et aussi l'appui pour les groupements de femmes qui sont spécialement utilisés pour produire les plants au niveau des pépinières dans les villages. Une dernière action assez importante qu'il faut mentionner, c'est cette inclusion-là. Comment est-ce que les femmes, les jeunes sont impliqués dans toutes les actions de reverdissement et comment est-ce que la paix est un focus sur lequel les leaders religieux mettre l'accent pour renforcer cette cohésion sociale. Donc, comme vous le voyez à l'image, c'est des groupements de femmes, je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, qui sont formés et qui sont appuyés pour produire des plants. Et elles sont aussi actives dans les actions de plantation d'arbres, mais aussi de production d'espèces assez nutritives. Donc, notre approche pour mettre à l'échelle toutes ces pratiques-là, c'est vraiment basé sur des leaders qui sont pour la plupart des producteurs, mais il faut le souligner, plus de la moitié sont des leaders religieux aussi, parce qu'ils ont, comme on l'a dit tout à l'heure, cet auditoire aux normes énormes-là, où ils se font bien écouter. Donc, notre approche de mise à l'échelle est vraiment focus sur ces acteurs-là de changement qui reçoivent du projet les appuis divers et qui ont cette responsabilité de disséminer cela au niveau des villages d'intervention et cela dans le but de nous permettre d'atteindre nos objectifs, mais aussi d'observer les impacts et les changements dans le paysage. Donc cela se fait plutôt à travers beaucoup d'actions de communication et des actions d'influence et aussi des actions de plaidoyer, je l'ai dit, on a des cadres d'échange avec les autorités locales et les chefs coutumiers, et aussi beaucoup d'actions de renforcement de capacité, aussi l'implication des responsables des commissions foncières. On a entendu nos prédécesseurs parler du foncier qui est, on se rend compte, un défi dans beaucoup de pays africains, où on sait que les femmes n'ont pas toujours accès aux terres, les jeunes aussi, on a tendance à les oublier et cela crée ce qu'on sait quand on parle des exodes, c'est beaucoup plus les jeunes qui sont touchés. Donc, majoritairement, notre plus gros défi, je l'ai mentionné tout à l'heure, c'est l'insécurité que nous connaissons au niveau de la région où nous mettons en œuvre ce projet et qui est de plus en plus rend instable un peu nos interventions. Néanmoins, nous continuons à explorer des pistes, collaborer avec les ONG locales, toujours renforcer la relation avec les acteurs locaux, les leaders religieux, les chefs coutumiers pour continuer à toucher ces communautés-là vulnérables. Donc, je vais finir ma présentation en citant le pape François, qui je me rappelle, au moment où on a lancé la décennie de la restauration des terres, qui disait restaurer nos écosystèmes, notre environnement, c'est nous restaurer nous-mêmes. Donc, cela touche directement nos foi et cela, je pense, je l'ai dit en introduction, ne pourra pas se faire sans l'implication des acteurs de foi, les leaders religieux. Merci.
Thank you so much, Hamed, and what a success it has been. I also greatly appreciate your identifying the challenges that are still there, but with your message of keep faith alive is very, very beautiful. Just to clarify, are there any quick questions for Hamed before we open the floor? Any questions or comments for Hamed? All right. Hamed, thank you so much. So
sorry, Constance,
sorry, Peter, I see you. Please, Peter. Apologies. Peter, en français, en anglais?
Oui, Hamed, merci pour la présentation. J'ai fait la distinction entre l'approche de Madagascar, où c'est l'Église qui exécute, c'est l'Église qui planifie sur la terre de l'Église. Mais au Niger, l'implication des leaders religieux, c'est un peu différent. J'ai l'impression que vous travaillez plus avec les conseils de communes ou autre chose, les autorités locales. Donc, est-ce que vous pouvez mieux expliciter quel est le rôle des leaders religieux? Ils n'exécutent pas, mais qu'est-ce qu'on leur demande de faire exactement pour les mieux impliquer? Malgré la très bonne présentation, je n'étais pas très clair. Qu'est-ce que les leaders religieux font exactement pour vous permettre de faire ce bon travail? Merci.
Merci. Donc, Constance, si tu permets. Donc, les leaders religieux, concrètement, quel type d'actions sont menées à leur niveau? Premièrement, toutes les actions de sensibilisation et d'éveil de conscience sont directement menées par les leaders religieux. Je vais être beaucoup plus clair. Nous avons beaucoup de défis au Niger en termes d'abattage d'arbres, des abus humains sur l'environnement. Et donc, une des actions, c'est déjà informer les gens sur ces pratiques-là, sensibiliser les gens sur les effets néfastes de ces pratiques-là, qui d'ailleurs génèrent des conflits et qui sont aussi, faut le dire, aujourd'hui gérés par les leaders religieux. Donc, les conflits entre producteurs, souvent parce que le voisin a coupé le bois dans le champ de l'autre voisin, sont gérés au niveau communautaire et les leaders religieux sont beaucoup impliqués pour la gestion de ces conflits-là. On a aussi des conflits qui sont aussi enregistrés souvent entre les éleveurs et les agriculteurs qui, en transhumant, coupent certaines espèces d'arbres pour nourrir leurs animaux et cela, on l'a vu à travers tout le pays, pas seulement dans la zone du projet, beaucoup de dégâts qui ont été faits au niveau humain et donc les leaders religieux, les autorités locales sont ces acteurs-là clés qui se mettent devant pour régler ces questions-là. Je vais citer un exemple que je pense que la première présentatrice a évoqué, c'est l'ablution. Je le dis, 99% de la population du Niger est musulmane. On a des zones où l'accès à l'eau est assez difficile. Quand on a commencé ce projet, une des sensibilisations au niveau des communautés, c'est accentuer les plantations d'arbres. Donc, on s'est confronté à cette question. On a à peine de l'eau pour boire, comment est-ce qu'on peut planter des arbres et les irriguer? Donc, une des réflexions nous a aujourd'hui mené à sensibiliser les communautés sur le fait de faire les ablutions peut se faire au pied des arbres. Donc, aujourd'hui, des milliers et des milliers de plants d'arbres sont plantés dans les concessions, autour des concessions, et le bon musulman prie 5 fois par jour et utilise de l'eau 5 fois par jour pour faire ses ablutions. Et on a estimé que cette quantité d'eau est assez suffisante pour irriguer cet arbre-là jusqu'à un certain âge où il est autonome. L'autre aspect où les leaders religieux sont impliqués, c'est qu'ils sont de vrais adoptants dans le terme où ils sont convaincus de ce qu'ils font. Et aujourd'hui au Niger, je l'ai dit, nos producteurs leaders, plus de la moitié sont des imams parce que leurs champs sont des champs modèles où toutes ces pratiques-là dont on parle, que ce soit la RNA, que ce soit les plantations d'arbres, que ce soit les greffages qui se font, les productions et même la diversité des espèces d'arbres dans les champs, ces leaders religieux ont des champs qui sont des vitrines pour nous au Niger. Donc, nous nous basons vraiment sur ces exemples-là pour aller à l'échelle. Et il faut le dire, dans les communautés, ces leaders religieux créent de la motivation, ne serait-ce qu'en créant cette envie-là, parce que leurs pères, au niveau des villages, en passant dans leurs champs, envient ces leaders religieux parce que c'est des champs qu'on voit qui ont, comme je l'ai dit, une diversité en termes d'espèces, mais aussi qui génèrent beaucoup de ressources et d'autres services écosystémiques. Donc cela crée beaucoup de jalousie au niveau des communautés. On le dit, c'est des informations que nous arrivons à recueillir souvent en discutant avec les populations. Voilà, donc je peux citer ces quelques exemples-là d'intervention de leaders religieux.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hamed. And I think you're resonating several of the things that we've heard today as well, which is how do we get also the livelihood side of things to work. So appreciate that. And I also want to just say thank you to all the speakers for touching on the gender and the youth dimension, which we all know is so important. So I'd like to open up the floor. And I have just registered a brief question for all of us, is how have faith and or personal values and those of your organization helped you actually contribute to the restoration of land? And while you're thinking about those responses, and if you have other responses to what we've heard today, please be thinking about those. I'd like to now call on Reverend Jane. Reverend Jane, you have the floor.
Okay,
Oh, you're muted. There.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh.
I wanted to say that hearing the participant from Niger share, it sounds like he was in Kenya in our arid and semi-arid lands. Is there any way where shared can be helpful to us by sharing his notes with us so that we may be able to learn, since it's greening? The parts of Kenya, parts of northeastern Kenya, really would do with the FMR. That's a concept that we really need to adopt. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm sure somebody's translating for him, and it's so refreshing to hear. That's all I wanted to comment.
That's wonderful, Reverend Jane, and exactly this is why we have these dialogues, is so that we can learn from one another. And I will mention that there is quite a bit of FMNR ongoing in Kenya, as well as a regreening project there. So yes, we'll keep this conversation going, sharing the presentations, etc. So thank you. I'd like to open the floor now to our colleagues to share either a reaction to what you've heard today, or just share how faith inspires you or your values inspire you to contribute to sustainable landscapes, and livelihoods.
Can I speak?
I would love that, Mariam, and I hope that others are in the wings. Thank you, Mariam.
I hope so too. I'll just quote a verse in the Quran that says that it forbids wasting of resources and destroying the environment. And the Prophet ﷺ told the Muslims not even to cut the trees during war. So he emphasized on the conservation of the environment and prevention of its destruction. So therefore, we're saying that conserving the environment is a religious duty for every Muslim and every other person within the earth, because even the Bible says the same. So I'm just saying that it is a religious duty for everybody else to conserve the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for that reinforcement, Mariam. All right. Who else would like to take the floor? I'd love to hear from some of you who we've not heard your voices yet in the room. And for those of you that do not want to speak loudly, feel free to respond in the chat box. What has struck you today of what we've heard? Have you had any aha moments from what we've heard? I would love to hear from the floor, please.
Constance, can I throw a question in?
Mika, that would be grand.
I'm really, first of all, thank you so much to all the interventions and the presentations. It's incredibly inspiring. But for A Greening Africa, we as a program will start to wind up and move into new phases next year. And we really want to understand how we can support this work going forward. So from the faith leaders, from others, what would be valuable for us to contribute to in terms of technical support and ideas, sharing your experiences before our program ends in this phase? And how can we take this work forward?
Thank you for that, Mika. Thank you for some requests for some very concrete input. All right, I'm opening the floor. Who would like to comment on the questions or the work that we've heard so far? And I'm going to check one more time for our colleagues who have not had a chance to speak. We'd love to hear from you, those of you that have joined and listened. Reverend James, and I see Reverend James, and so I'll go there and then come back to Imam for your reactions to what you've heard. Reverend James, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you again. Like she had said, the last speaker, what we would like to do is to raise an army of religious leaders doing preaching green sermons and setting days up for 3 weeks of tree planting in their various religious areas and communities, and ensure that we follow up with them to ensure that they are planting. And further to that, if she wants to partner in any way, we would like a situation where also that those peace tree projects can be supported to escalate it as soon as possible. For me, that is one. But I'd like to also commend the various speakers, our sisters from the coast of Kenya, our brother who spoke in French in Madagascar. I think there should be exchange program where we share experiences, not only online or not by Zoom, but virtually, but also physically, that we can go see on the ground what these people are doing, learn from them, and bring it to our communities and domesticate them. Now, for me, that would be a wonderful idea that will move this thing faster. So, and lastly, I want to see that a subject is also introduced into our theological and Islamic institutions, deliberately targeting future pastors and imams. When they go back, they will do that. So how do we raise support to begin to undergo this training? Now, for the women, I also know we have done something with some women who that they came to begin to do that. So where do we have a universal or an interfaith day of tree planting all over the world? But it cannot occur all over the world because of our geographical differences and availability to the natural source of water or maybe rain. So it can be regional, but then it should also come along with some kind of incentive, like a cup or a kind of a prize that when the people who did most in planting trees and regreening the environment can get some certain kind of incentive. And also those who do not do it well, they can be named and shamed. Thank you.
Thank you for those very clear recommendations, Pastor James. That was excellent. And I do appreciate Mika's question about, we've got all these big projects going forward, and how do we take these lessons and ensure that we can make them work? And I'm glad to come back now to Imam Ashafa. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody, especially our two twin sisters, twin Imamres and the Papres. Imamres and the Papres, if there's anything like that in English, I mean Halima and Jane Jelani. Well, what is important for me, I think, for this lady is how do we, first, there is little resources, religious resources, resource material on this area of land restoration, regreening our environment, and the issue of deforestation. So the need to reproduce more material in this field. If this organization is running out next year, within this year, we need to produce standard inclusive resource material on interpretive approach to some of these important key entry points, alternative to what scientific and other secular organizations are doing, professional, technical organizations are doing on land. We need to do that, and we'll be very happy to work with such organizations to produce some of these training manuals. Number two, there's a need to move into children in schools. Children in schools, carrying them young, to engage them. In most of schools that are within the vulnerable landscape, the landscape areas, how do we get those children in school, getting them most involved, especially the children and the women? But thirdly, I strongly feel that yes, we have so much to do, but key important thing for me is that today, the land, the Mother Earth is crying seriously that we are misusing and abusing it. The plants are crying that we are cutting them down, so we are not replacing others. And the water sources are crying that the Son of Man is highly polluting water sources across the earth, which consequences, when the earth reacted back, the high level of the flood we are seeing in our society, the high level of earthquake, and so on, and natural devastation are consequences of our misuse and abuse of nature. And I believe if we, the development partners, will support massive reorientation of youths, students, and most importantly, students from theological institutions, on the values of saying, when you preach, when you teach his sermons, those ethical code of conduct that are based inherently human ethics and core values, we need to highlight it so that our children, the next generations, know how to protect the land as much as better than how to exploit the nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Imam Ashafa. And we really appreciate these very direct recommendations, very concrete recommendations. And I can see Mika, who posed the question, is delighted to have heard from both of you about what we can do now to make the coming projects work well. So let's see if there's anyone else who has a question or a comment about today's session. I very much appreciated Peter looking across the different case studies and identifying some of the differences he was seeing. And I'm delighted to come back to Lori or to David if you have any reflection on what you've heard today. We've had some very generous speakers today, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give some reaction. Commissioner, I see you have unmuted. Would you like to take the floor? Commissioner Shamsan? No? Lori, please.
Yeah, I'll jump in. You asked about an aha moment. So just to share an aha moment for me is CRS thinks about scaling and the importance of local leadership and farmer-to-farmer exchange. One of the speakers commented about how religious leaders are also farmers and have the inspirational role that they play. And for me, it made me immediately think of one of our most amazing farmer leaders in Malawi, who was able to not only engage his own natural resource management community to restore a watershed, but who then went to the watershed community, or the community above his in the watershed, and his community taught the community above to institute the same practices. And it just made me, we've always been inspired by him, but I never until today connected it to the fact that he is also a pastor. And that as we think about our farmer champions and our leaders, maybe we need to more intentionally connect and cultivate our faith leaders who are also farmers to play that role as champions. So thank you for that aha moment for me.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm going to now come back to Peter, who I see has raised his hand again. Peter?
Yeah, thank you for giving me a second chance to talk. I just have one sort of concern. I mean, this has been so encouraging and it's such an important issue. And I was very inspired by the Imam from Nigeria and the different pastors who've spoken, shared their experiences. And absolutely, we need to find ways to engage religious leaders. So that has come out loud and clear. But my sense of what's required for land restoration at scale is that however important the faith communities are and however important they are to move things forward, we need to think about a larger movement in each country of different allies, of the NGOs, the local NGOs, the farmer organizations, and the faith community to change mindsets, to put advocacy together collectively on government to provide an enabling situation with land tenure and tree tenure, those sort of issues. There's not, however important the faith communities are, however large CRS and World Vision are, I hope that we would agree that it needs a wider movement in the civil society involvement. And that's the importance of faith communities to bring about the sort of changes that are needed at land restoration at scale. And I'm just a bit worried that the focus of the seminar, or webinar, however important it is, that we don't lose sight of the fact that we all need to work together and think about allies in addition to the faith community to bring about the sort of changes that we want to see to bring about, land restoration at scale. So that's my comment.
Excellent, Peter. Thank you for that. I think that was that's a really nice thing for us to consider. And I know a lot of people in this room are working in multi-stakeholder as well as either faith or multi-faith approaches. So it'll be interesting to hear back. I'm going to now invite Halima Mohammed to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Constance. And in response to Imam Ashafa's concern and whether we will need in terms of materials back in Kenya, I will say yes, there's a lot of capacity building that is needed when it comes to the greening in Africa. At the same time, when also it comes to our people, and also try to nurture the young kids that you're doing in schools, trying to having that the need, at the same time the passion that we have as adults, we instill it to the young people so that they can grow with it and also know that the love that we have for the trees, they can also do the same when they grow up. So I think in terms of materials, it's still needed, and there's a lot that is missing when it comes to the greening in Africa and land restoration, which we need to put across that, not only in Africa, but again, across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Halima Mohammed. Thank you very much. And I see that, Mika, you have a reaction to Peter. Would you like to voice that? And then I'll come to Marianne.
Sure, I'll just sort of summarize what I put in the chat. But Peter, I think, of course, we need a much wider community of all different types of actors, civil society, NGOs, government, research, networkers, to be able to bring around the kind of scale and change that's needed in land restoration. But I do think, and that is the reason for the emphasis today on the faith community, that the faith community is really critical to this work and has often been overlooked and left out of the discussion or not linked to effectively or as much as they could be in this dialogue. So I think today we're very much focusing on the potential and what's happening and what has already been achieved by the faith community to really highlight that this is an important part of the conversation and that they are a really important actor. So I agree, but I think that the emphasis still stands today on the faith communities because of the role that they could play and the further role that they can play moving forward.
Well put. Thank you so much, Mika. May I invite Marianne Tene to tell us what she has announced in the chat? Marianne, you have the floor. S'il vous plaît. I understand you're organizing an event that is very pertinent. Marianne, could you just explain? All right. Well, as I understand it, there's going to be a very important webinar on the innovative approaches to resolving conflicts on agropastoral systems in Cameroon. And so all of us are invited. So if we get that information in detail, we will share it. I think at this moment, I think we're about to bring our seminar to a close. And I did want to ask my co-facilitator, Alan Channer, this is all your theme. I wondered if you wanted to make a comment before we make a last request and say goodbye.
Thank you so much,
Alan?
Constance. Thank you so much. Well, you sent me a WhatsApp message saying, Alan, do you have a kind of concluding or thought as we come to the end? And I found it so interesting that I really found I was quite kind of moved, really, that I didn't really have a specific comment, because it's, except really to thank Regreening Africa and Mika and C4 ICRAF for having this discussion, and, you know, actually moving it to become a mainstream thing. I think what Mika said was extremely important. You know, faith organizations, faith communities have been overlooked, and what an extraordinary omission. And how wonderful it is to be part of something so potential. I was struck by what Jules Bayala shared, you know, and that we're joining some dots here, and we're even joining them within ourselves. And I'm just very moved by the potential of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. Indeed. Well, this is exactly why we host these events, is truly to bring those comments, what is really happening on the ground. We've learned so much from our case studies, from our colleagues who have framed the conversation. And I am going to just invite us, if you will, if you want to write an inspirational message, a message of hope into our chat box. And then I would invite that, that you, if you can, bring on your videos so that we can greet one another as we leave this very important subject and move back into integrating it into our daily lives. So if you have a message of hope that you would like to put into the chat box, we would be delighted. And in the meantime, may we invite people to put the video on so that we can see you, so that we can see your smiles, so that we can thank all of you for being here. And so we can thank all of those who have supported us. And do feel free to turn on, take your microphone and just shout out anything that you would like. I'm so happy to see all these faces. I'm so grateful that you all joined us. I am so delighted that we've had this opportunity and with such inspirational speakers. So,
okay, bye.
So I want to thank you. If you have a message you want to share now, shout it out.
Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Greetings from Kenya.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
welcome to Kenya.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it's so beautiful to see everyone. Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you all.
Until we meet again, and we will
Yes,
share the output.
trees, more trees, more trees, more trees.
Oh,
Let's... All right, bye.
You are all
Bye.
welcome to Kenya. Welcome to Kenya, please.
Yes, we are coming to Kenya. Don't worry.
I'll receive you at the airport.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you to
Bye.
our speakers, James.
Yes.
Good to
Bye.
see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.